security camera showed someone standing alone on level 5 of the parking garage. But the building had already been locked for hours, and when the night guard went upstairs to investigate, he found nobody there, only wet, barefoot footprints disappearing into the darkness. Back in 2019, the man in this story had reached one of the lowest points in his life. After a painful breakup and losing his apartment, he moved back into his older brother's house in Sacramento with almost no money left. Desperate for work, he accepted an overnight security job at the Marlowe parking structure, an old 6-level parking garage downtown. The job sounded simple: sit alone, watch security cameras, and patrol the building occasionally. But the moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. The flickering lights, freezing air, and endless concrete silence made the entire garage feel strangely heavy and unsettling. For the first couple of weeks, nothing unusual happened. Most nights involved helping drunk office workers find their cars, dealing with false alarms, or occasionally waking homeless people sleeping near stairwells. But there was one thing he noticed almost immediately. Every single guard hated going to level 5. Whenever he asked why, the conversations became awkward. Some guards changed the subject completely. Others simply shrugged and told him not to worry about it. But one older guard named Frank finally gave him a direct answer during a late-night coffee break. Frank had worked security for years and looked permanently exhausted. When the younger guard joked that level 5 must be haunted, Frank didn't laugh at all. Instead, he stared quietly into his coffee before saying something strange. "Just don't stay up there longer than you need to." The way he said it completely changed the mood. Suddenly, the joke didn't feel funny anymore. After that conversation, the younger guard started paying closer attention whenever he patrolled level 5. The silence there felt heavier than the rest of the garage. The corners seemed darker somehow. Even parked cars felt unsettling, like someone might be crouching behind them watching. He kept telling himself it was only paranoia. But deep down, the level already felt wrong long before anything truly terrifying started happening. Everything changed because of camera 15. The camera overlooked the north elevator entrance on level 5 and initially seemed unreliable because of old wiring. Every single night at exactly 2:33 a.m., the feed glitched into heavy static for several seconds before returning to normal. At first, nobody thought much about it. Old building, old equipment. But one night after the static cleared, the guard noticed something impossible standing near pillar C17. A woman, completely motionless. He immediately sat forward in his chair staring at the monitor because he knew no cars had entered recently. Nobody should have been there. What disturbed him most was how unnatural she looked. She wasn't moving at all. Long dark hair covered part of her face, and her dark clothing blended into the shadows behind her. She looked less like a real person and more like someone digitally pasted into the camera feed. He radioed for backup but received only loud static in response. Finally, he grabbed his flashlight and headed upstairs himself. The elevator ride to level 5 felt strangely long that night, and the moment the doors opened, a horrible sensation hit him immediately. The entire level felt occupied somehow, like someone nearby was quietly watching him from the darkness between parked vehicles. Yet the garage remained completely silent. The guard slowly searched level 5 with his flashlight, sweeping the beam across rows of empty parking spaces. No woman, no movement, no sound except faint traffic somewhere outside. Eventually, he reached pillar C17 where the woman had appeared on camera. The space was empty. For a second, he almost laughed at himself. Maybe exhaustion really was making him paranoid. Then he looked down at the floor. Wet, barefoot footprints covered the concrete beside him. Small prints. Fresh prints. They stretched away toward the stairwell nearby. His stomach immediately tightened with fear. Nobody could have left those prints without him hearing movement. Still, he followed them carefully. Every echoing step made his heartbeat louder. The deeper he moved toward the stairwell, the more uneasy he felt. Then halfway there, the footprints suddenly stopped. Not faded, not turned around. They simply ended in the middle of the concrete floor like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. Before he could even process it, his radio exploded with deafening static. Underneath the static, he heard breathing. Slow, wet breathing directly inside the speaker. That sound completely broke him. He immediately turned around and hurried back toward the elevator without looking behind him once. By the time he reached the security office downstairs, his hands were visibly shaking. But the worst part was knowing the footprints had been real. The next night, camera 15 glitched again at exactly 2:33 a.m. This time the woman appeared closer to the elevator doors. The guard felt genuine fear immediately, because he had personally checked every entrance of the garage less than 20 minutes earlier. Nobody had entered. Nobody. Yet there she stood again, perfectly motionless beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. Over the next several nights, the same pattern continued. Static. Then the woman appeared one section closer to the camera every single time, pillar by pillar, step by step. The guard eventually started recording the monitor using his phone because nobody at work believed his story anymore. Most coworkers thought stress was affecting him mentally. But when he finally showed the recordings to Frank, the older guard's reaction terrified him more than the footage itself. Frank turned pale the moment the woman appeared on screen. After several long seconds of silence, he whispered, "She's back." That night, Frank finally explained the history of Level 5. Years earlier, a woman became trapped inside the elevator after midnight. The emergency phone malfunctioned. Nobody heard her calling for help. Hours later, panicking and desperate, she attempted to force the doors open herself. Something shifted mechanically. The elevator crushed her to death before maintenance workers found her. And after the accident, guards started reporting sightings around camera 15. After hearing the story, the younger guard tried convincing himself that everything still had a logical explanation. But deep down, he already believed something was wrong, because by then, the sightings had spread beyond the cameras. At first, he only noticed strange reflections. While walking patrols, he occasionally caught glimpses of someone standing behind him in glass elevator doors or parked car windows. Every time he turned around, nothing was there. Then the footsteps began. One night, while climbing the stairwell between level 3 and level 4, he heard slow barefoot footsteps behind him. Slap, slap, slap. The sound perfectly matched his pace. Whenever he stopped walking, the footsteps stopped too. The silence afterward felt even worse. He stood frozen for nearly 30 seconds, listening carefully before forcing himself to continue upward. Again, the footsteps returned behind him. Slow, wet, deliberate. He spun around with his flashlight but found only an empty stairwell stretching downward into darkness. The experience rattled him badly. After that night, he stopped taking stairwells entirely and used elevators whenever possible. Sleep also became impossible. Even outside work, he constantly felt watched. He started noticing women with long dark hair everywhere in crowds and reflections. Rationally, he knew stress and exhaustion could cause paranoia. But part of him understood something else had attached itself to level 5. Something patient. Something waiting. The worst events started during a violent thunderstorm several weeks later. Heavy rain pounded the garage all night while thunder echoed through the concrete structure. Around 2 a.m., power fluctuations started affecting the building. Lights flickered constantly, and most security cameras temporarily went offline, all except camera 15. The guard sat nervously watching the monitor while rainwater streamed across the camera lens. Then at exactly 2:33 a.m., the feed erupted into violent static again. When the image returned, the woman stood directly outside the elevator doors staring toward the camera. Her hair covered most of her face, but her posture looked horribly unnatural. Slowly, she tilted her head sideways. The camera distorted violently. At the exact same moment, the elevator alarm screamed through the building downstairs. The guard nearly jumped out of his chair. He immediately checked the elevator monitor. The display showed level 5 descending toward level 1. Nobody had scanned into the elevator system. Nobody should have been riding it. Yet the elevator continued moving slowly downward. Level 4, level 3, level 2, then finally level 1 ding. The lobby doors opened automatically. The hallway camera showed absolutely nobody standing outside. But through the office speakers, the guard could hear water dripping somewhere inside the elevator. Every instinct in his body screamed at him not to investigate. But fear mixed with curiosity forced him forward anyway. The elevator doors remained open when he approached the lobby. The inside looked empty at first glance. Then he noticed muddy, wet footprints covering the elevator floor. Barefoot prints. Fresh water still dripping between them. His pulse immediately accelerated. The footprints led outward from the elevator directly toward where he stood. He backed away instinctively, unable to stop staring at them. Then another terrifying realization hit him. There were no footprints leading into the elevator, only outward. Something inside the elevator had walked toward him. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered again. For one split second during the darkness, he thought he saw someone standing at the far end of the hallway watching him. Then the lights stabilized and the hallway became empty again. That was the first moment he truly believed his life might be in danger. He returned to the office, shaken beyond words, and spent the rest of the shift staring at the monitors in complete silence. Every small movement on camera made him panic. Every burst of static sounded threatening now. He considered quitting immediately but desperately needed the paycheck. So despite overwhelming fear, he kept returning night after night, and somehow things still continued getting worse. Several nights later, the event happened that completely shattered his understanding of reality. At exactly 2:33 a.m., camera 15 glitched once more. By now he already expected the woman to appear closer than before. Instead, when the static cleared, the camera showed him standing on level 5. Same security uniform, same flashlight, same posture. The problem was he was physically sitting inside the security office on level 1 at that exact moment. He stared at the monitor in absolute disbelief. Then the version of himself on screen slowly turned toward the camera lens and smiled. A huge unnatural smile stretched across its face while the real guard sat frozen in terror. The smiling version of himself then raised one arm and pointed behind the camera, as if something else stood nearby watching. Immediately, the feed cut back into static. At the exact same moment, wet barefoot footsteps echoed outside the office door. Slap, 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 slowly approaching through the hallway. The guard rushed forward and locked the office door with shaking hands. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Then soft scratching began against the metal door, fingernails slowly dragging downward. The sound continued for several unbearable minutes while he stood frozen across the room, trying not to breathe too loudly. The scratching outside the office eventually stopped. Then came complete silence. The guard remained motionless, staring at the locked door, waiting for the sounds to return. Instead, he heard a woman whisper softly from the hallway, "Can you hear me now?" His blood ran cold instantly because Frank had mentioned those exact words before. Witnesses claimed the trapped elevator victim repeatedly screamed the same sentence into the malfunctioning emergency phone before she died. Hearing those words spoken directly outside the office completely broke whatever confidence he still had left. The whisper sounded wet somehow, almost like someone speaking underwater. After that, silence returned again. 10 full minutes passed before the guard finally gathered enough courage to approach the door. His entire body trembled as he unlocked it and slowly pulled it open. The hallway outside stood completely empty. No woman, no intruder, nothing. But the floor directly outside the office was soaked with water, as though someone dripping wet had stood there for a very long time. He finished the rest of the shift without leaving the office once. Every camera monitor now felt dangerous to look at, especially camera 15, because part of him believed something inside that garage had finally noticed him personally. The following morning, the guard finally told his supervisor everything, every sighting, every footprint, every whisper. He expected ridicule or anger. Instead, the supervisor only looked exhausted. After a long silence, the man admitted something horrifying. 3 previous guards had reported nearly identical experiences over the years. One quit immediately after seeing the woman. Another suffered a complete mental breakdown and refused to return to work entirely. But the third case disturbed him most. One guard disappeared completely during an overnight shift years earlier. Officially, the company claimed he abandoned his post. But his wallet, keys, and car were still found inside the parking structure afterward. He was never seen again. The younger guard quit later that same day without giving notice. He never returned to the Marlowe parking structure. Months later, part of the garage underwent renovation and demolition work. During construction, workers discovered another body hidden deep within the old elevator shaft. A homeless woman who apparently fell inside years earlier and was never reported missing. Maintenance logs later revealed multiple unexplained security camera malfunctions occurred around the time she vanished. Suddenly, the stories about level 5 felt even more disturbing than before. Because maybe the garage wasn't haunted by only one victim after all. The parking structure eventually reopened under new ownership, new security systems, new management, new guards. Officially, the company claimed all previous incidents were exaggerated rumors connected to faulty equipment and stress. But years later, the former guard still refuses to drive anywhere near the building after dark. According to him, the nightmare never truly ended. Every few months, he receives anonymous emails from random burner accounts with no subject line and no written message. Each email contains only a single attached image. Screenshots taken from parking garage security cameras. and every image shows the same horrifying thing. Someone standing motionless on level 5 staring directly toward the camera lens. Sometimes it looks like the original woman. Other times it appears to be a security guard. In several screenshots, the figure stands unnaturally close to the camera as if slowly approaching through each new image. The sender is never identified. Authorities traced several emails but found nothing useful. The accounts disappear immediately afterward. The former guard claims he no longer opens the attachments anymore, because the last time he did, he noticed something different in the image. The figure on level 5 wasn't watching the camera anymore. It was looking directly at him. Somewhere tonight, another overnight guard is probably sitting alone watching camera 15, and at exactly 2:33 a.m., the static will begin again. If you enjoyed tonight's story, subscribe to Taka Tales Stories for more terrifying true horror tales every week.